Welcome to Fact or Freestyle.
People love Dave Nourie, and they always answer the phone when he calls. When we get him on Zoom, we ask him to confirm rumors.
Let's see how far down the rabbit hole we go.
Hello, Dave.
Can you hear me? I hear you.
Excellent.
How are you? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. It's as though COVID has kept all of us as hermits.
A lot of product this year, though. I tell you, we've got a lot of product done.
That's awesome. Did Dave explain to you the premise of what we're doing here?
I just kind of gave him a little teaser. Joe and I started calling each other, kind of like, I think in the sense that we were just missing hanging out and like telling stories. So we started sharing stuff like either things that we heard or posts that we kind of were watching. We're just like, man, this is kind of fun. We should call people up. So we call random people, like hopefully we can get some stories, maybe some untold stories from Robert that you have.
During the course of this, we have come across some very unexpected stories that seem wacky, and those were that actually inspired the factOrFreestyle. The first one up we call
factOrFreestyle. Joe Johnson had ants in his pants when he invented the vert tail whip.
Called Joe Johnson Had Ants in His Pants. The way the story came to us was when Joe Johnson learned the tail whip. This story that he tells was he was getting super close, but it would never take. And he developed a twitch that actually made it all happen. However, the twitch was from an ant that bit his taint because he had ants in his pants.
I think I've heard this story. I wasn't around for when that happened, but I was there when he did the double in Colorado Springs.
Do you think he had 2 ants in his pants at that point then?
He better have about 10 in there when he was doing that. I would have to say that's fact.
We had Joe on the show early on.
Yeah.
Like when we first heard this, and he denies it. So
He's kind of very uncomfortable with this.
Maybe he's a little bit embarrassed. Because it's something like, Joe, wasn't there more to it? He was on tour with McCoy, and they had like sweaty leathers, and they had him sitting out like between the show. And I remember this day and age when we were doing shows like back to back, and it was super hot. So we would basically take our leathers off and just have our shorts and t-shirts on, and then come to the show, we'd put our sweaty leathers back on to do the next show. So that's likely that there's ants. We haven't got any like confirmation that someone was there and seen the ant. We have Joe's denial. Robert said you maybe have heard it, but yeah, it's just an interesting factOrFreestyle.
Was Ron there? Because Ron could have had something to do with that.
No, I don't believe Ron was there. I think this is when he was doing shows with McCoy. Maybe come back around to Joe, after a few more confirmations or denial to see, okay, Joe, is it?
He's probably going to say no ants helped him out on that trick.
What about that Jose thing? What was that again, Joe? It was something about Jose had this thing against Brian. Wait, before we get into Brian, Joe, I just thought of something. Can you tell that story, Robert, of Brian? We were there with 2 hip. It was a 2 hip, right? It was a 2 hip clinic.
And I didn't know how to roll in on ramps yet. And I was just terrified. I'd always just put my leg over and drop in. And it was you, Ron, and Brian. But Brian was working on the roll in. And finally, he just pushed me in. And that's how I learned how to roll in on a ramp. And I was like, that's it. That's how I learned how to roll in on quarter pipes and half pipes and all that, was because he just pushed me. Had no choice. I think I sat on that ramp for an hour before he pushed me in. Would it work like a charm? I'm rolling on anything now. But I do got to add something to the story on this. So after the 2 hip deal, Fred asked if I wanted to go eat. So we went out to eat, and he didn't tell me I was going to hang out with Brian, Ron, and Dave there. So we went to Pizza Hut. Did Brian Blyther pour me a beer?
Oh, that's a factOrFreestyle. Oh, okay.
Wow.
So is Officer Blyther actually has a history of contributing to minors?
I was 15 years old, starstruck.
15
years old, starstruck, and the man, did he hand me a beer?
Good question. Now wait. There's a couple qualifying questions though. I want to know what was the alcohol content of the beer? Is this one of those Coors Light?
It was a Pizza Hut, so it was 3-2.
3-2. Okay, that's not as bad. It's not as severe, but still 15, 3-2. Is this your first beer, or are you
no, 15? No, this is no.
Okay. So it wasn't the floodgate. It wasn't the gateway. So I'm going to take a stab at this one, Robert. I'm just going to go with my gut. I think that's actually fact. I don't think it's freestyle.
I believe it's fact as well.
You guys are correct.
Wow.
Okay.
And pizza with my legendary heroes at a Pizza Hut after I got pushed in on a ramp.
That's incredible. It took me years to meet my heroes, let alone talk to them.
That great day, man. That was Steve Swope was there, and then everybody from Colorado. It was fun. McMurray was there. Troy McMurray. It was just fun. Yeah.
Okay, so Robert,
factOrFreestyle, the Jose Vendetta.
Jose invented the backflip, right?
Jose Inez, yeah.
Have you heard anything about what's behind his burning desire to pull that trick? Because we actually heard that it had to do with this vendetta that he had with Brian Blyther. And apparently he's got some old footage of him doing, this is pre like 1984. So this is a little bit before your time, but I'm just trying to see if you've heard this over the years. The first time that I seen him do it was in 1985 at the Winter Nationals in Chandler, Arizona.
Okay.
And that's the first time I did a show with Brian. But here's the thing that's funny is that, so Brian Blyther got a picture, got a sequence shot of him doing a flatland tail whip, foot jam tail whip, basically on flat in freestyling. And his story is that he was just goofing around. Like he was doing curb endos and the frame kicked around. And he's like, oh, I'll just do a foot jam. And he did a tail whip. So in between the sessions on the half pipe, he was messing around, and whoever was the photographer was taking pictures and like, wow, what's that trick? And Brian's like, oh, I don't know. I was just messing around. I don't even have a name for it. It's not really a trick. And they're like, oh yeah, it's a tail whip. So someone named it a tail whip. Well, apparently Jose had been working on this trick and has some old footage of him, predates this. He's going to get it digitalized. He says that he made it before Brian and he really feels bummed out that he missed that opportunity, right? So he learned the backflip just to prove Brian. But here's where it gets exciting. Apparently, there's some talk of some rumor out there saying that he's going to do a tail whip in Baldy Pike on an electric motorcycle. Joe, what's the type of motorcycle he's doing now?
So remember the Travis Pastrana bar spin motorcycle? He's got a rig like that, and he's going to do a tail whip there. And the whole idea is he's going to flex on Brian Blyther because Brian has never done a backflip. However, Jose has never gotten credited for the tail whip. So he's going to take a motorcycle, tail whip that motorcycle in Baldy Pike to flex on Brian on his home turf. Have you heard anything related to the story known as the Jose Vendetta?
I have not heard anything about the Jose Vendetta.
Do you think that's fact or freestyle? Like, do you think that's plausible or is that just way out?
I think it's plausible. I mean, there's a lot that went on behind the scenes that people don't know nothing about. I would have to say that's definitely plausible. I'm sure there was some.
Well, we do know that Brian Blyther pushes kids into ramps, and we know that he serves them alcohol. So we got some.
So Brian Blyther perhaps didn't innocently invent this tail whip in between photo session.
Right. He probably saw Jose do it somewhere. I don't know. Brian's a good guy. I love him to death, and I'm just wondering, like, what is he up to?
I wouldn't have imagined him pushing kids into ramps and then giving them beer.
Joe, that just reminded me about.
Fact or freestyle? Fred Blood invented the decade after trying it for exactly 10 days.
You were talking about the decade and the nowhere bike, and I was just thinking about like how far the decade has evolved, and like John Yole doing the nothing decade. I think that's like that's the peak of it. But Joe, why don't you lead with this one because you know the background.
So this came front of mind recently because of the dramatic resurgence of Fred Blood on Instagram. And according to sources, Fred Blood invented and named the decade, and it got its name because it took Fred Blood 10 days to learn it. However, other sources indicate that Fred observed someone else doing the decade and then leveraged his connections to the liberal media to rewrite history. And
There it is.
there's a young man by the name of Dean Palacio who actually did the work of inventing this and who has lived in obscurity for several years as a result.
He called it inverted
Boomerang. And
So
hold on a second. There is further collusion between the then liberal media and the judges panel and the rule writers of the contest circuit at the time, wherein the AFA during that period of time banned inverted tricks.
Dean said that you couldn't do anything inverted on Flatland.
So we want to check in with you because as someone who was thrown down a ramp by Brian Blyther, you have some years in the game.
Sure.
Can you tell us about this?
You know, I heard, I think, a story on this, and I believe, I can't tell you about the AFA part of it, but I believe there was pressure down as far as who invented it, because I believe Dean did, if I remember right.
Fact or freestyle? Tricky Styler invented what R.L. Osborne later claimed and named as the G-turn.
Goes back as far as the G-turn with Tricky Styler. We call it the whiz bang instead of the G-turn, and he did that in Denver.
Wait a second. Tricky Styler G-turn whiz bang.
Yep.
This one hasn't come up.
We called the whiz bang. The G-turn was called the whiz bang here in Colorado.
And who's credited to making up the G-turn? I don't even know. I mean, I think it
know that, but I know that was the first time I saw it, and that was like 83, and that's when he lived here in Colorado. I thought RL came up with that.
Just so you know, I did see a G-turn.
General guys, they seem to take things.
Yeah. So Robert,
wait a second. You then heard that RL had invented the G-turn,
right?
But you know differently because you saw one of your own local.
That was the whole reason I learned the trick. Hey, the Fred Blood thing's probably true. I'm just not sure about the AFA part of that because the only AFA contests that I made to were Overland Park, Kansas, and Ohio. Mostly Overland Park, Kansas, because it was the closest to Colorado.
I think this brings up another Denver. I mean, the guy's not from Denver, but he lives there now. Kind of tangent of who made up what when. There is a bit of history that we've kind of unveiled with the backwards bar ride. So Joe, what do you know about this?
All right, here we go. Fact or freestyle? James McGraw did a backwards bar ride in his amateur run a few hours before R.L. Osborne did it in his pro run.
This would be that would be Jumpin' Joe Hendricks. That sound right?
So backwards bar ride?
Backwards bar ride.
Oh, we add another mix into it. So
yeah, that could be that. I'd have to confirm that with Fred because he was on the Mile High Trick team.
Here's an assemblage of facts that we've gathered. So first, let's just put a stake in the ground that R.L. Osborne was in the magazine as the inventor of the backwards rubber ride.
86 is what we're thinking, right?
However, we are hearing reports that in February of 1986, in Palm Beach, several eyewitnesses, including the most honest in the game, Todd Carter, observed a scrawny Michigan scarecrow looking like Jimmy G. McGraw doing a backwards bar ride in that contest.
If it came Todd Carter, it's true, and it wouldn't surprise me. That's McGraw's trick.
Here's what comes up though. The question is how it's not as easy obviously to make up a new trick nowadays, but just going back through the history books, you hear about the 900. Dominguez did the 900 in his backyard.
Right.
No footage. I don't even know who all was there to witness it. I'm imagining probably Brian, Blyther, but I'm not certain. And then Hoffman did the first one in a contest. So it's like we're trying to figure out what is like the protocol and what is the right, is it the first time the first person to get it in the magazine? Is it the first person to do it in a comp? How does that work really?
Gets it either on, either some sort of video. I don't think you have to do it in a contest because I think if you do it in a contest, you've had it for some time, unless you just get lucky and pull one at some point. I mean, it's like
Joe Gratola.
When you pull in a contest, it just stamps that you did it, and it can make it first, whether it is or it isn't.
I actually have some firsthand experience with this, and I'll you mentioned something, Robert, about the 900, and it matters who was around. I made a very bold claim that I was the first to do a death truck on a cruiser. And about a year after, 12 months worth of celebrating, Scott Powell, who often rains on parades, puts his arm around me and he says, "I don't want to rain on your parade," which right there I knew was a lie. And he said, "Jason Lehman did it in Montrose parking lot in 1980 something or other." Now, there's no video of this. Scott Powell's the only one who's mentioned this. I haven't spoken with Jason Lehman about it. But Scott Powell knows the emotional damage that it would cause me if it turns out that my NBD was actually ABD.
You do have a complete edit on a 24-inch bike, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. So I would have to say, since there is no proof, you get the award.
If I were to take this to a vote, I suspect that if Scott Powell took one side of that, I would get quite a bit of support on the other side of that.
I'll assist you, then I'll Ashland, and you'll see it right there on the right. So yeah, go this way and take the main road. Okay, go.
Are you ordering pizza?
He's ordering us some food.
I'm ordering some pizza, guys. They'll be here in a minute. I'm back. Sorry, guys.
Fact or freestyle? Dean Palacio invented what's known as the Nourie handstand.
So apparently Dave was at the same contest as Dean Palacio, like much, much earlier. And Dean Palacio was doing handstands on the front wheel where he was grabbing the bars and seat and balancing with his hand on the tire.
It's even better than that. You got a photo in the magazine doing that.
You got a photo in the magazine? He did a lot of stuff.
So have you ever heard a named trick by that description?
Not by that description. No.
Vanity named trick that matches that description.
Yeah, there's the one trick, just the basic, Chris Douchy did the main one. But,
okay.
Okay, that clears it up then.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the Chris Douchy.
I mean, she had the bend and everything. The legs were damn near on the back of her head. I forget the name of the trick, as far as that goes.
According to some people, this is referred to as the Nourie handstand.
Well, you got the Nourie handstand, right?
Dean Palacio.
I think that's what Joe was trying to describe. I think he did a really good job. But
that's what I was scooting at.
Okay, I got the Nourie handstand. Yes, okay, we got that.
So Dean Palacio has a photo of him doing that trick prior to it being in a magazine, prior to that being named the Nourie handstand.
So we're trying to see, should we rewrite history and change it to the Palacio stand?
No. He stole that from you. No, that didn't happen.
He did it in his contest before I went out there. So he not only did the trick first, but he also got it in the magazine first.
Yeah,
so he has two going for it.
But do you know that for sure? He did it before you?
Yeah, I was watching it. My jaw just hit the ground. I'm like, oh my gosh, he just did the trick I was going to do that. I didn't think anybody was doing.
That would be like changing the name of the Roperoni at this point. Am I right?
It would be like changing the name of the Roperoni. There's tremendous cultural inertia.
Right? The Nourie stand is yours. That'd be like trying to steal the Gumby from you. That ain't gonna happen.
I'm gonna say we could like merge the two. We could call it the Palacio Nourie stand, the Nourie Palacio stand.
Okay.
You should hyphenate it.
Hyphenate it.
Nouriacio, Nourie. And Joe, thanks for not going too far over the edge. You know, at times I have to always pull you back, but you seem like you're pretty on point today.
Dave is my restraining bolt.
Yes, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's good to see you, Joe.
Otherwise, I would go off the range. Yeah, good to see you too, Robert. Merry Christmas. See you.